I knew Marco would betray me again the moment I was reborn into this new life with all my memories intact. The bitter taste of his first betrayal still lingered on my tongue like over-extracted espresso, acidic and unforgiving. In my previous life, he stole my coffee shop chain concept and left me with nothing but empty promises and hollow apologies. Now, history was preparing to repeat itself, but this time, I'd be ready. The small bell above the cafe door jingles as Marco pushes through, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and ambition. He spots me in our usual corner booth and waves enthusiastically as if we're still the best of friends, as if he hasn't already begun plotting behind my back. Sophia, sorry I'm late, he calls out, threading his way between tables. His voice carries that familiar musicality that once charmed me and countless investors. I force a smile while my fingers tremble slightly around my mug. No problem. I ordered your usual. The rich aroma of freshly ground beans envelops us, creating an intimate bubble in the crowded cafe. Marco takes a deep breath, his eyes closing momentarily in appreciation, before he slides into the booth across from me. God, I love how this place smells, he says, loosening his scarf. It's like heaven. I nod, remembering how in my past life, we'd joked about bottling the scent of fresh coffee and selling it as perfume. That idea, like so many others, Marco had eventually claimed as his own. So, I begin, pulling out my notebook filled with carefully crafted plans. Plans I've perfected through 2 lifetimes. I've been refining the business model for Bean and Gone. I think we're almost ready to approach investors. Marco leans forward, his eyes lighting up as they always do when money is mentioned. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been doing some networking. My stomach clenches as he utters almost the exact words from my previous life. I already know what comes next, but I let him continue, curious to see if every detail will align with my memories. There's this group of angel investors looking for innovative food service concepts, he explains, gesturing enthusiastically. The silver watch on his wrist catches the light, a new addition since we last met. They're specifically interested in artisanal coffee chains with growth potential. I nod slowly, fighting to keep my expression neutral. That sounds perfect for us. When can we meet them? Marco hesitates just for a second, but it's enough. I see the calculation behind his eyes, the split-second decision to exclude me. It's still early stages, he says smoothly, just preliminary discussions. But I wanted to get your latest numbers so I can put together a compelling pitch deck. The cafe suddenly feels too warm. The woolen sweater I'm wearing scratches against my skin as I reposition myself, buying time to control the anger threatening to surface. The hiss of the espresso machine punctuates the moment, a harsh, pressurized release that mirrors my internal state. I slide my notebook across the table, watching his eyes devour my ideas. Everything's there: target demographics, cost analysis, growth projections, even the store layout concepts. His fingers reverently brush over my detailed sketches. Sophia, this is incredible. You've thought of everything. Almost everything, I murmur, too quietly for him to hear over the grinding of coffee beans. That night, I lie awake in my apartment, listening to the rhythmic tapping of rain against my window. My ceiling fan creates a gentle whirring backdrop that fails to soothe my racing thoughts. Last time, I was blindsided by Marco's betrayal. This time, I'll document everything. I reach for my phone and open my voice memo app. October 15th. Marco mentioned angel investors interested in our concept. He's planning to meet them without me. In my previous life, this was the first step in his betrayal. He'll claim it was just an informal meeting, that he was just testing the waters. Next, he'll register our business name without telling me. 3 days later, Marco calls me, his voice bubbling with excitement that nearly masks his underlying guilt. Sophia, you won't believe what happened. I ran into one of those investors yesterday at a networking event, completely by chance. I grip my phone tighter, knuckles whitening. Oh, he loved our concept. Well, the basics I could share off the cuff. He wants to meet properly next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. at their downtown office. I play along, marking the date in my calendar, even though I already know what will happen. That's fantastic, Marco. I'll be there. Perfect. I'll text you the address on Monday. Monday comes and goes with no text. By Tuesday morning, my anxiety festers despite knowing exactly what's coming. I call Marco repeatedly, each unanswered ring feeding my growing frustration. When he finally picks up, the meeting is already underway. Marco, where are you? Where's the investor meeting? There's background noise, murmured conversations, the clink of glasses. Sophia? Oh God, I'm so sorry. The meeting got moved to 11 a.m. I thought I texted you. The lie slides so easily from his tongue that for a moment, even I almost believe him. My nails dig into my palm as I struggle to maintain my composed facade. You didn't, I say flatly. Look, it's going amazingly well. They love our concept. We can celebrate tonight, okay? I'll tell you everything. The celebration never happens. Marco becomes suddenly busy, unreachable except for brief, enthusiastic texts about exciting developments. 2 weeks later, I'm scrolling through business registrations online, something I never thought to do in my previous life when I see it. Bean and Gone Coffee Company, registered solely to Marco Valdez. The betrayal punches through me, a physical ache that spreads from my chest to my limbs. Even though I expected it, even though I knew it was coming, the pain feels fresh and raw. I hurl my coffee mug against the wall where it shatters with a satisfying crash. The dark liquid trickles down my white wall like tears. Rain pelts against my windows as I compose myself, breathing in the lingering coffee aroma now mixed with the petrichor seeping through my partially open window. The distant rumble of thunder mirrors my internal turmoil. I call Marco immediately, my voice deceptively calm. I just saw the business registration for Bean and Gone. A pause. Too long. Oh, yeah, I was going to tell you about that. It's just a formality, Sophia. The investors needed the business registered before they would commit. It doesn't change our partnership. Then why is only your name on it? Another pause. Legal technicality. Their lawyer suggested keeping it simple for now. Once we have the funding secured, we'll restructure everything properly, I promise. I close my eyes, remembering how I believed these exact words in my past life. How I trusted Marco completely. How that trust ruined me. I see, I reply, offering nothing more. The investors are ready to move forward, Sophia. They're putting up $2 million. Can you believe it? We're going to make this happen. The we hangs in the air, hollow and meaningless. That's wonderful news, I say, my voice stripped of emotion. Let's meet tomorrow. I'll explain everything. This is still our dream, Sophia. I wouldn't do this without you. But he would. He did. And this time, I'll be ready when he tries. That night, I start making calls to people I never contacted in my previous life. People whose importance I only realized too late. My first call is to Eduardo Reyes, a coffee supplier who Marco eventually pushed out in favor of cheaper beans. Miss Chen, this is unexpected. Eduardo's deep voice travels through the phone, carrying traces of his Colombian accent. I'm sorry to call so late, Mr. Reyes. I'm developing a coffee chain concept, and I've heard you supply the best single-origin beans in the city. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership. The clacking of computer keys pauses on his end. Most new businesses look for the cheapest suppliers, not the best. I'm not most businesses, I reply, a newfound confidence strengthening my voice. Quality is everything in coffee. I won't compromise on that. A soft chuckle reaches my ears. I think we should meet, Miss Chen. One by one, I reconnect with everyone Marco eventually betrayed or undervalued. Baristas, suppliers, location scouts. I lay the groundwork for my contingency plan, a web of relationships that will catch me when Marco inevitably cuts me loose. The next morning, Marco texts me to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where deals are made over $50 steaks and $200 bottles of wine. I arrive precisely on time, dressed in a sharp blazer and carrying a sleek leather portfolio filled with documents I've prepared for this exact moment. The restaurant hums with muted conversations and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. The subtle scent of truffle oil and aged meat permeates the air, mingling with the floral notes of expensive perfume worn by the business elite at surrounding tables. Marco waves from a corner booth, already halfway through a glass of red wine. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. Sophia, you look great, he says, standing to greet me with a kiss on each cheek. His aftershave is woody and sophisticated, another new development since we last met. I slide into the booth, maintaining a pleasant expression while taking careful note of the subtle changes in his appearance. Designer watch, tailored suit, haircut that probably cost more than my rent. The investors have been generous with the advance, I see, I observe casually. Marco's smile falters momentarily before returning, brighter and more artificial. Just making some necessary upgrades for our new business image. First impressions matter in this industry. The waiter appears and Marco orders another bottle of wine without consulting me. The subtle power play doesn't go unnoticed. So, I say once we're alone again, tell me about these exciting developments. Marco leans forward, lowering his voice. The investors were blown away by our concept. They're putting up $2 million, Sophia. $2 million to start, with the potential for another 3 in the second round of funding. That's incredible, I say, allowing genuine enthusiasm to color my voice. In my previous life, the initial investment had been only $1 million. Marco's pitch must have improved this time around. So, what's our next step? Location scouting? Equipment purchases? Marco's expression shifts almost imperceptibly. Here it comes. About that, he begins, reaching for his wine glass. The investors have some conditions. I wait, silently urging him to continue. They're very specific about the management structure, he says, not quite meeting my eyes. They want a clear line of authority for decision-making. I nod, the script playing out exactly as before. That makes sense. Efficient decision-making is crucial for a new business. Right? Marco seems relieved by my understanding tone. So they've suggested, and I think it makes sense too, that I should be the CEO and principal owner. The words hang in the air between us. In my previous life, this moment shattered me. Now, it simply confirms what I already knew. And where does that leave me? I ask calmly. Marco brightens, clearly relieved I haven't stormed out. You'd be perfect as our operations manager, overseeing the day-to-day, maintaining quality control, all the things you're exceptional at. Plus a very competitive salary and a small equity stake, of course. A small equity stake, I repeat, keeping my voice neutral, in the business I conceptualized. Marco shifts uncomfortably. It's just the initial structure, Sophia. As we grow and prove ourselves, there will be opportunities to renegotiate. The important thing is getting Bean and Gone off the ground, right? The waiter returns with our wine, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. I watch as the deep red liquid cascades into my glass, reminding me of the coffee that spilled down my wall last night. What would my equity percentage be? I ask after the waiter leaves. Marco hesitates. 5% initially. But with performance bonuses and 5%. I cut him off. And your share? He clears his throat. 51%. The investors retain the rest. I allow my disappointment to show, but not my anger. Not yet. That's quite a difference, Marco. It's just business, Sophia. The investors are taking all the financial risk. We have to respect their terms if we want this to happen. I take a slow sip of wine, calculating my next move. In my previous life, I argued passionately, then eventually capitulated, desperate to be part of the dream even in a diminished role. This time, I'll appear to surrender even more quickly. I understand, I say softly, watching surprise flicker across his face. You're right. The most important thing is making Bean and Gone a reality. If this is what it takes, I'm willing to accept the operations manager position. Marco blinks, clearly expecting more resistance. Really? That's great, Sophia. You won't regret this. We're going to build something amazing together. I smile, reaching into my portfolio. I do have one small request, though. Would you mind signing this? I slide a document across the table. What's this? He asks, immediately suspicious. Just an acknowledgement that the original Bean and Gone concept, including the name, branding elements, and core business model, were my intellectual property that I'm willingly sharing with the company. It doesn't change the ownership structure or your authority. His brow furrows as he scans the document. Is this really necessary? We know what we contributed. I maintain my smile, though it doesn't reach my eyes. Indulge me, Marco. It's just for my personal records. After a moment's hesitation, he signs, clearly believing this small concession worth making to secure my cooperation. He doesn't notice the small recording device in my purse, capturing his admission of my contributions to the business. To Bean and Gone, he says, raising his glass in a toast after signing. I clink my glass against his. To getting exactly what we deserve. The first Bean and Gone location opens 3 months later in the trendy West Side district. The space is exactly as I envisioned it: warm wood furnishings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a gleaming copper espresso machine imported from Italy. My design concepts brought to life, down to the last detail, yet the plague on the wall lists only Marco as founder. I throw myself into my role as operations manager, training baristas in the precise techniques I've perfected over 2 lifetimes. Each morning, I arrive before dawn to test the day's beans, adjusting the grind to account for humidity and temperature. The rich, earthy scent of coffee grounds clings to my clothes and hair, becoming my signature perfume. The extraction time is off, I tell Javier, our head barista, watching as he tamps down the grounds with too much pressure. 27 seconds is too long. You'll get bitterness in the cup. Javier nods respectfully. You have an amazing palate, Sophia. I've never met anyone who can taste the difference of a few seconds in extraction. I smile, remembering how in my previous life, it took years of experience to develop this level of sensitivity. This time, I arrived with my expertise fully formed, a fact that occasionally raises eyebrows among the staff. Marco rarely visits the shop floor, preferring to hold meetings with potential investors and real estate agents for future locations. When he does appear, he treats me with a careful deference in front of the staff, maintaining the illusion of partnership. Sophia, these new single-origin beans from Eduardo Reyes are incredible, he says one morning, genuinely impressed with the smooth, chocolatey notes in his cup. The customers are raving about them. I nod, knowing what comes next. In 3 weeks, Marco will try to switch suppliers to cut costs. Eduardo takes exceptional care with his farms and workers, I reply, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. The ethical sourcing is as important as the taste. It's part of what makes Bean and Gone special. Marco's smile tightens almost imperceptibly. Of course. Quality is everything. I notice a customer listening intently, a food blogger whose review would later help establish Bean and Gone's reputation in my previous life. I make a mental note to approach her before she leaves. That evening, I stay late to reconcile the daily receipts. The cafe is quiet, the chairs upturned on tables, and the floors freshly mopped. Only the gentle hum of the refrigerators breaks the silence. I breathe in the lingering coffee aroma mixed with the lemon scent of cleaning solution, finding comfort in the familiar smells. The back door opens and Marco enters, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He doesn't seem surprised to find me still working. Monthly projections are looking good, he says without preamble, setting his laptop on the counter. We're ahead of our targets. I nod, continuing to count the day's receipts. Customer return rate is up to 63%. That's excellent for a new cafe. Marco makes a non-committal sound, opening a spreadsheet on his computer. We need to talk about costs. Here it comes, right on schedule. Our margins are tighter than I'd like, he continues, turning the screen toward me. The investors are concerned about sustainability. I look at the highlighted row, cost of goods sold. The beans, I say flatly. Marco nods. Eduardo's prices are significantly higher than market average. I've found another supplier who can deliver similar quality for about 30% less. I close the receipt book with a snap. There is no similar quality. Eduardo's beans are exceptional because of his methods and standards. Cutting corners there would be immediately noticeable to our customers. Most customers can't tell the difference between a good cup and a great one, Sophia. They come for the experience, the ambiance. That's not true, I counter, anger flaring. Coffee enthusiasts absolutely can taste the difference. And they're our core demographic. The ones who post reviews, bring friends, create buzz. Marco sighs, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Look, I've already arranged a tasting with the new supplier. Sierra Coffee Company has an excellent reputation and works with several upscale restaurants downtown. My stomach drops. In my previous life, the switch to Sierra's inferior beans was the beginning of Bean and Gone's quality decline. Customers noticed immediately, but Marco insisted it was all in their heads. Within 6 months, our reputation was damaged beyond repair. Marco, I say carefully, changing our coffee supplier 3 months after opening sends a terrible message. It says we're willing to compromise on our core product for profit. It's just business, he replies dismissively. All companies optimize their supply chains. Not at the expense of their fundamental identity, I argue, passion creeping into my voice despite my best efforts to remain calm. Our entire brand is built around exceptional coffee experiences. Marco's expression hardens. The decision's been made, Sophia. Sierra's beans will arrive next week. Your job is to make them work with our existing recipes. The familiar sensation of helplessness threatens to overwhelm me, but I push it away. This time is different. This time, I'm prepared. Fine, I say, closing my laptop with deliberate care. I'll do my best. Marco looks surprised at my capitulation, but quickly masks it. Good, I knew you'd understand. After he leaves, I pull out my phone and call Eduardo Reyes. It's happening, I tell him when he answers. Marco's switching to Sierra next week. Eduardo's deep sigh travels through the phone. Just as you predicted. Are we moving forward with the contingency plan? Yes, I confirm, a quiet determination settling over me. It's time for Plan B. The next morning, I arrive at the cafe with puffy eyes and disheveled hair, playing the part of the devastated business partner. The baristas exchange concerned glances as I methodically prepare the morning brew with shaking hands. Are you okay? Javier asks, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I offer him a weak smile. Just a rough night, nothing to worry about. Throughout the day, I make a show of accepting calls from Marco, nodding meekly at his instructions. When the Sierra Coffee representative arrives for a staff tasting, I participate without complaint, though I can't hide my grimace at the flat, uninspired flavors. That evening, I meet Eduardo at a small restaurant 3 neighborhoods away from Bean and Gone. The dimly lit space smells of garlic and aged rum, and the rhythmic Latin music provides perfect cover for our conversation. I've secured the location, Eduardo tells me, sliding a folder across the table. 2 blocks from Bean and Gone's flagship. The previous tenant was a bakery, so most of the kitchen infrastructure is already in place. I open the folder to find lease agreements, floor plans, and preliminary design concepts based on my specifications. The familiar excitement of creation bubbles up inside me, mingled with something darker, vindication. And the investors, I ask? Eduardo smiles. Very interested. Your business plan is exceptional, and your inside knowledge of Bean and Gone's operations makes for a compelling competitive advantage. Plus, my supply chain connections are no small incentive. I take a sip of the rich, spiced rum, letting it warm me from within. How soon can we move? 2 weeks for basic renovations. A month until we can open doors. I nod, calculating the timeline against Bean and Gone's planned expansion. Perfect. Marco won't know what hit him. Eduardo raises his glass. To Original Brew, the coffee shop Bean and Gone should have been. I clink my glass against his. To second chances. The next few weeks pass in a blur of divided loyalties. By day, I manage Bean and Gone with apparent dedication, training staff on the new beans despite their inferiority. By night, I work with Eduardo and our silent investors to bring Original Brew to life. The switch to Sierra's beans happens exactly as I predicted. Regular customers notice immediately, their faces registering confusion and disappointment with the first sip. Complaints begin to trickle in, then flow steadily. The coffee tastes different, says a regular named Tom, frowning at his cappuccino. Did you change something? I glance around to ensure Marco isn't within earshot. New beans, I admit quietly. Management decision. Tom's frown deepens. It's not as good. That complex chocolatey finish is gone. I nod sympathetically. I know. I've passed along customer feedback, but I trail off with a helpless shrug. This small act of subversion, acknowledging the decline in quality rather than defending it as Marco insists we should, becomes my daily rebellion. Within 3 weeks, Bean and Gone's online reviews begin to mention the change and our customer return rate drops to 48%. Marco calls an emergency staff meeting. The Sierra transition isn't going as smoothly as anticipated, he admits, pacing before the assembled baristas. The smell of his expensive cologne mingles with the coffee aroma, creating a discordant sensory experience. But I need everyone to stand behind our product. If a customer complains, emphasize the ethical sourcing and sustainability of our new supplier. I struggle to keep my expression neutral, knowing Sierra's labor practices are questionable at best. This lie is new. In my previous life, Marco simply insisted the beans were objectively better and customers would adapt. After the meeting, Marco corners me in the supply room. The enclosed space amplifies the scent of coffee beans and his increasingly overwhelming cologne. I resist the urge to step back. "You're not supporting this transition, Sophia," he accuses, his voice low and dangerous. "The staff follows your lead and you're undermining me." I meet his gaze steadily. "I'm doing my job, Marco. I can't control how customers respond to an objectively different product." "Don't test me," he warns, leaning closer. "Remember who signs your paychecks." The threat hangs between us, familiar yet still stinging. In my previous life, this was the moment I surrendered completely, afraid of losing everything. This time, I simply nod, secure in the knowledge that Original Brew is nearly ready to open its doors. The confrontation leaves me shaking with suppressed rage. I escape to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and practicing the breathing techniques I've mastered in this second life. The cool water drips down my neck, grounding me in the present moment. When I return to the floor, there's a commotion near the entrance. A well-dressed woman is speaking animatedly with Javier, who keeps glancing in my direction. "Miss Chen," Javier calls when he spots me. "This is Alexandra Vega from Bean Monthly. She'd like to interview you about our coffee program." Alexandra Vega, the influential coffee blogger I noticed earlier, extends her hand. "I've been following Bean and Gone since you opened. Your initial offerings were exceptional, but I've noticed some changes recently." I shake her hand, mind racing. In my previous life, Marco handled all media interactions, keeping me firmly in the background. This unexpected opportunity feels like the universe confirming my new path. "I'd be happy to discuss our program," I say carefully, aware that Marco could return at any moment. "Perhaps over a cup of our current offering so you can form your own opinions?" Alexandra smiles knowingly. "That would be perfect." I lead her to a quiet corner table, signaling Javier to prepare our newest blend. The late afternoon sun streams through the windows, casting golden light across the polished wood tables. I position Alexandra so her back is to the entrance, giving me a clear view of anyone entering. "Off the record," she says once we're settled, "word in the industry is that Bean and Gone has switched from Eduardo Reyes's beans to Sierra. Not exactly a lateral move in terms of quality." I hesitate, weighing my options. "Quality is subjective," I say diplomatically, then lower my voice. "But if you're asking my professional opinion as a coffee expert, rather than as Bean and Gone's operations manager," Alexandra leans forward eagerly. "I am..." The original beans were superior in complexity, mouthfeel, and ethical sourcing, I admit. The current situation is not what I would have chosen. She nods, making a quick note in her phone. "That's what I thought. Eduardo doesn't supply just anyone. He's very selective about his partnerships." The conversation feels dangerous, exhilarating. I'm walking a tightrope between loyalty to my current employer and integrity to my craft. "Speaking hypothetically," Alexandra continues, "if someone wanted to experience the kind of coffee Bean and Gone initially offered, where might they go in the near future?" I meet her gaze, understanding the real question. I couldn't possibly comment on hypothetical coffee shops. But if you leave me your card, I'd be happy to update you on any developments in the local coffee scene. Alexandra slides her business card across the table with a knowing smile. I look forward to it. As if on cue, Marco appears at the cafe entrance. His eyes narrow when he spots me with an unfamiliar woman, and he makes a beeline for our table. "Marco!" I call out, my voice deliberately bright. "Perfect timing. This is Alexandra Vega from Bean Monthly. She's doing a piece on new coffee establishments in the city." Marco's expression transforms instantly from suspicion to charm. "Miss Vega, what an honor. I'd be happy to tell you about our vision for Bean and Gone." I stand smoothly, yielding my seat. "I'll leave you in Marco's capable hands. I need to check on tomorrow's order anyway." As I walk away, I hear Marco launching into his well-rehearsed founder's story, conveniently omitting my contributions. Let him talk, I think. Soon enough, everyone will know the truth. That evening, I receive a text from Eduardo. Inspections passed, original brew can open next Tuesday. I stare at the message, heart pounding with anticipation. After months of preparation, my counter move is finally ready. Marco's second betrayal, changing the very soul of our coffee shop, will soon be answered. Everything's ready on my end, I reply. Time to show the neighborhood what real coffee tastes like. Original Brew opens with a little fanfare, a soft launch deliberately designed to build word of mouth rather than splashy publicity. The cafe is smaller than Bean and Gone, but more intimate, with comfortable seating arranged to encourage conversation. The walls display educational information about coffee origins and processing methods, and the air is perfumed with the intoxicating aroma of Eduardo's premium beans. I take a leave of absence from Bean and Gone, citing family emergency as the reason. Marco seems relieved by my temporary absence, likely interpreting it as surrender following our confrontation. For the first few days, business at Original Brew is steady but unremarkable. Then, Alexandra Vega's review drops in Bean Monthly's online edition. Original Brew might be the new kid on the block, but its coffee program demonstrates the expertise of seasoned professionals. The single-origin Ethiopian pour-over delivered complex notes of blueberry and dark chocolate with a clean, wine-like finish that lingered pleasantly. Coffee enthusiasts will recognize the beans as Eduardo Reyes premium offerings, the same exceptional product that briefly made Bean and Gone the neighborhood's most promising cafe before their unfortunate supplier change. The effect is immediate. By noon, there's a line outside Original Brew that stretches down the block. The bustling energy inside the cafe makes the wooden floorboards vibrate beneath my feet as customers crowd around the counter, eager to experience the coffee Bean and Gone used to serve. I work alongside my small but dedicated staff, guiding them through the rush with the calm efficiency I've perfected over 2 lifetimes. My fingers fly across the espresso machine, muscle memory allowing me to produce perfect shots while simultaneously greeting customers by name, many of whom I recognize from Bean and Gone. Sophia, is that you? I look up to find Tom, our former regular, gazing at me with surprise and delight. Tom, welcome to Original Brew. I hand him his usual order, a cappuccino with an extra shot, before he even asks for it. His eyebrows rise as he accepts the cup. You remembered. Of course, I reply warmly. Good baristas never forget a loyal customer's preference. He takes a sip, closing his eyes as the flavor registers. This is it, he says, voice tinged with reverence. This is what I've been missing. Word travels fast. By the end of our first week, Original Brew is the talk of the neighborhood, while Bean and Gone's once bustling cafe sits half empty across the street. Through the large windows of my shop, I occasionally glimpse Marco standing outside his store, watching the crowd at Original Brew with a darkening expression. The confrontation, when it comes, is both inevitable and precisely timed. Early Sunday morning, just after opening, when the cafe is momentarily empty. The bell above the door chimes discordantly as Marco pushes through, bringing with him a blast of cold air and the now cloying scent of his cologne. So this is why you needed a family emergency, he says without preamble, his voice tight with controlled fury. His eyes scan the space, taking in the warm decor, the gleaming equipment, the carefully crafted menu. How long have you been planning this betrayal? I continue wiping down the counter, a deliberate power move in its casualness. Betrayal? That's a strong word coming from you, Marco. He steps closer, lowering his voice. We had an agreement. You're my operations manager. Was. I correct him calmly. I resigned yesterday. The letter should be on your desk tomorrow morning. Marco's face flushes with anger. You stole my customers. I finally look up, meeting his gaze steadily. I didn't steal anyone. I simply offered what they wanted, quality coffee made with Eduardo's beans and proper extraction techniques. The same product Bean and Gone used to provide before you prioritized profits over quality. This is a legal matter now, he hisses. The non-compete clause in your contract doesn't apply, I interrupt smoothly. I had my lawyer review it thoroughly. The clause specifically prevents me from working for an existing competitor, not from opening my own independent business. You should have been more specific in your wording. The first customers of the day push through the door, momentarily distracting us both. I greet them with a warm smile, pretending not to notice the thunderous expression on Marco's face. We'll continue this conversation later, he mutters before stalking out. Later never comes. Instead, 3 days after our confrontation, a health inspector arrives at Original Brew during the morning rush. The timing couldn't be worse. The cafe is packed, staff are running at full capacity, and I'm in the middle of demonstrating a pour-over technique to a curious customer. Health inspection, the woman announces, flashing her credentials. We've received an anonymous complaint about possible code violations. My heart sinks, but I maintain my composure. Of course, I'm happy to cooperate fully. The inspection is thorough and painfully public. Customers watch with increasing discomfort as the inspector examines every corner of our operation, taking photographs and making copious notes. I know we maintain impeccable standards. I've been fanatical about it, but the inspector seems determined to find something. And find something she does, a small bag of unlabeled white powder tucked behind the flour in our storage room. "What is this?" she demands, holding up the suspicious package. I stare at it in genuine confusion. I have no idea. That doesn't belong to us. "I'm going to have to test it," she says ominously. The powder turns out to be a non-food grade chemical additive, prohibited in commercial kitchens. The kind of violation that can shut down a business. "This is grounds for immediate closure pending further investigation," the inspector announces loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. My blood runs cold as the realization hits me. This is Marco's retaliation, a deliberate sabotage. In my previous life, he never went this far, never stooped this low. The betrayal stings freshly, despite my preparation. "This isn't ours," I insist, hands trembling with barely contained fury. "We've never used this product. Someone must have planted it." The inspector's expression remains impassive. "That's what everyone says, Miss Chen. I'm issuing a temporary shutdown order effective immediately. You'll need to ask all customers to leave while we continue our investigation." The wooden spoon I'm clutching snaps in my grip, the sharp crack echoing in the suddenly silent cafe. Eduardo emerges from the back office, his face grave as he absorbs the situation. "Please," I tell the waiting customers, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Due to an unexpected inspection issue, we need to close temporarily. Anyone who hasn't received their order will get a full refund plus a free drink coupon for your next visit." As the customers reluctantly file out, murmuring in confusion, I catch sight of a familiar figure watching from across the street through Bean and Gon's windows. Marco quickly steps back when he notices my gaze, but not before I glimpse his satisfied smile. "It was him," I whisper to Eduardo as the last customer leaves. "Marco planted that chemical to shut us down." Eduardo nods grimly. I suspected as much when the inspector arrived during peak hours. This kind of targeted anonymous tip inspection doesn't happen by coincidence. The inspector continues her examination, documenting additional minor violations that would normally merit warnings rather than closure. The message is clear. Someone wants Original Brew shut down, and they've found an effective way to do it. Once the inspector finally leaves, posting a garish, closed pending investigation sign on our door, I sink into a chair, the weight of this new betrayal settling over me like a wet wool blanket. The silence of the empty cafe presses against my ears, broken only by the gentle hiss of the espresso machine cooling down. "What now?" Eduardo asks, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. I close my eyes, inhaling the rich coffee aroma that still permeates the space. It centers me, reminds me of why I'm fighting. When I open my eyes again, determination has replaced despair. "Now," I say, rising to my feet, "we use this time to our advantage." The shutdown lasts 3 weeks, 3 excruciating weeks of appeals, follow-up inspections, and bureaucratic hoops. I hire a specialized food safety lawyer who helps document the suspicious circumstances, though proving Marco's involvement proves impossible without direct evidence. But I refuse to remain idle during the closure. Instead, I transform this setback into opportunity. First, I document every health violation at Bean and Gone that I observed during my time there. The occasional mold issues in the back storage area, the inconsistent refrigeration temperatures, the cleaning shortcuts during busy periods. Nothing dangerous, but enough to warrant scrutiny if the health department were to conduct an equally rigorous inspection of Marco's operation. Second, I used the downtime to scout 3 additional locations in nearby neighborhoods, securing favorable lease terms from landlords eager to have a quality coffee shop in their buildings. The deposits come from a special contingency fund I'd established precisely for this purpose. Third, I develop a comprehensive marketing campaign highlighting Original Brew's commitment to authentic recipes and ethical sourcing, creating a compelling contrast to Bean and Gone's cost-cutting measures. The campaign materials sit ready to launch the moment we reopen. During this enforced break, I maintain contact with our customer base through social media, sharing behind-the-scenes looks at our enhanced safety protocols and renovation improvements. Their supportive comments and messages fuel my resolve. Can't wait for you to reopen. Bean and Gone isn't the same, missing my Original Brew fix. Hang in there, we know this shutdown is bogus. When we finally receive clearance to reopen, we do so with a splash. A grand reopening featuring free samples, brewing demonstrations, and a newly expanded menu. The line stretches around the block, customers returning with fierce loyalty strengthened by our absence. Marco watches from across the street, his expression darkening as he witnesses our triumphant return. Bean and Gone's crowd has dwindled further during our closure, with many customers having explored other options once Original Brew was temporarily unavailable. Looks like his plan backfired, Eduardo observes, nodding toward Marco's increasingly empty cafe. I smile, a genuine feeling of satisfaction warming me from within. He always underestimates the importance of quality and customer loyalty. 2 days after our reopening, Marco appears at Original Brew during a quiet afternoon lull. The bell above the door jingles as he enters, his footsteps hesitant on the polished wooden floor. His expensive cologne now seems muted, as if even his scent has been humbled by recent events. "Can we talk?" he asks, an unfamiliar note of desperation in his voice. I nod to Eduardo, who takes over the counter as I lead Marco to a secluded corner table. The afternoon sun streams through the windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air between us. "I'm listening," I say, not offering him coffee. Marco runs a hand through his hair, which looks less perfectly styled than usual. "Bean and Gone is struggling," he admits. "Revenue is down 60% since Original Brew opened." I wait, saying nothing. "The investors are growing nervous," he continues, his voice dropping. "They're talking about pulling out if things don't improve by quarter's end." "That sounds like a you problem," I reply coolly, though inside I'm savoring this moment. A scene that never played out in my previous life because I never fought back effectively. Marco leans forward, lowering his voice further. "What if we combined our businesses? Original Brew is clearly thriving, and Bean and Gone still has the advantage of 3 additional locations and established brand recognition. Together, we could dominate the local coffee market." The proposal catches me off guard. In my previous life, Bean and Gone expanded rapidly but eventually collapsed under the weight of its compromised quality and overextension. Marco never proposed a merger. His pride wouldn't allow it. "You want to combine our businesses?" I repeat slowly. "Under what terms?" Hope flickers in his eyes. "Equal partnership, 50-50. We'd rebrand the Bean and Gone locations as Original Brew, implement your quality standards across all shops, and pool our resources for further expansion. Equal partnership, the arrangement we should have had from the beginning. The offer is tempting, not because I need Marco, but because acquiring his locations would accelerate my expansion plans significantly. I'd need to see the books," I say cautiously. "Full financial disclosure before I consider anything." Marco nods eagerly. "Of course, complete transparency. We could start the process tomorrow." "I'll think about it," I say noncommittally. "Send over the financial statements, and we can talk again next week." As Marco leaves, visibly relieved at this small opening, I feel a twinge of something unexpected. Pity. He truly doesn't understand that this desperate olive branch is too little, too late. That some betrayals can't be undone with business proposals. The financial documents arrive the next morning via courier, a thick envelope containing Bean and Gone's complete records. I spend the evening reviewing them, noting with grim satisfaction the steady decline in revenue following the switch to Sierra's beans, the mounting debt from overly aggressive expansion, and the increasingly desperate cost-cutting measures. Rather than discarding the documents, I methodically scan each page, creating digital copies that I save to an encrypted folder. Knowledge is power, and Marco has just handed me a comprehensive map of his operation's weaknesses. The morning after I receive the documents, I'm visiting one of Original Brew's planned new locations when my phone buzzes with an urgent call from Eduardo. Marco's at the cafe, he says without preamble. He's asking about your decision and seems agitated. I check my watch. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't tell him anything about our expansion plans. When I arrive, Marco is pacing near the counter, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The sharp scent of alcohol clings to him despite the early hour, a detail that catches me by surprise. In my previous life, Marco never drank during business hours, priding himself on his professionalism. "You've seen the numbers," he says as soon as he spots me. "You know my situation. I need an answer, Sophia." I motion him to a table away from curious customers. "Marco, I've reviewed everything and I have concerns. Bean and Gone's financial position is worse than you indicated." He swallows hard, Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "The investors are pulling out at the end of the month if I can't turn things around. This merger is my only option." "Our only option?" I correct him gently, testing his desperation. Yes, our only option," he agrees quickly. "I'm willing to renegotiate terms if necessary. Maybe you take controlling interest 60-40 in your favor?" The offer hangs in the air between us. Marco, who once stole my business from under me, now offering me controlling interest in his failing company. The irony is almost too perfect. "I need to consult with my partners," I tell him. "This decision affects them too." Marco nods, relief flooding his features. "Of course, but please, don't take too long. Time is a factor." As Marco leaves, I notice his hands shaking slightly, another deviation from my previous life's memories. His desperation seems more acute this time, his fall more precipitous. Perhaps my more effective countermoves have accelerated his downward spiral. That evening, I meet with Eduardo and our silent investors to discuss Marco's proposal. The meeting takes place in a private dining room of an upscale restaurant, the table laden with gourmet dishes that go largely untouched as we debate our next steps. Acquiring Bean and Gone's locations would save us months of renovation and permit processes, Eduardo points out, the delicate aroma of truffled risotto wafting up from his untouched plate. One of our investors, a sharp-eyed venture capitalist named Vanessa, disagrees. "But we'd also be taking on their debt and damaged reputation. Is the real estate worth the baggage?" I sip my water, considering both perspectives. "What if we don't merge with Bean and Gone?" I say slowly, "but acquire them outright after they fail, the locations without the liabilities?" Vanessa leans forward, interest piqued. "A strategic acquisition rather than a merger. That could work, but only if we can get the properties at distressed prices before another buyer steps in. We'd need insider information about exactly when they're likely to fold," Eduardo muses. I smile, thinking of the financial documents in my possession. "I think I can provide that." The plan takes shape over dessert. An elegant strategy that will position Original Brew to absorb Bean and Gone's assets while leaving its liabilities behind. The sweet scent of caramelized sugar from our creme brulee mirrors the sweet taste of coming victory. The next day, I call Marco to deliver my decision. "I've thought about your proposal," I begin. "And?" His voice is tense with anticipation. "I'm interested, but I need more time to perform proper due diligence. Can we meet next week to discuss specific terms?" Marco exhales audibly. "Next week works. I'll hold the investors off until then." "Perfect. In the meantime, I'd like to visit your other locations, get a feel for them." "Of course, I'll let the managers know you're coming." The delay tactic works perfectly. While Marco believes I'm seriously considering his offer, I use the week to implement the next phase of my plan, a subtle dismantling of Bean and Gone from within. My tours of the other locations provide valuable intelligence about their operations, staff morale, and customer base. I introduce myself as a potential partner, forming connections with key employees who seem disillusioned with the current management. The quality has really gone downhill, confides a barista named Melissa during my visit to Bean and Gone's downtown location. We used to have such high standards, but now it's all about cutting corners. I nod sympathetically. That must be frustrating for someone who clearly cares about coffee. It is, she agrees, lowering her voice. Several of us are actually looking for other opportunities. If you know of any good coffee shops hiring, I slip her my card with a knowing smile. As a matter of fact, I might. One by one, I identify and connect with Bean and Gone's most talented staff members, laying groundwork for future recruitment. By the time the weekends, I have a list of potential hires ready to jump ship at the first opportunity. Meanwhile, Eduardo works his supply chain connections, quietly informing Sierra Coffee that Bean and Gone may soon be unable to pay its invoices. The resulting credit hold forces Marco to purchase beans on less favorable terms, further straining his cash flow. When we finally meet to discuss the merger, Marco appears noticeably haggard. Dark circles shadow his eyes, and his normally pristine shirt shows signs of hasty ironing. The desperation radiating from him is almost palpable, filling the air between us like a physical presence. I've drafted some preliminary terms, he says, pushing a document across the table. His fingers leave a slight tremor in the paper. I scan the proposal, noting how heavily it favors my position. Far more generous than anything Marco would have offered in a stronger position. He truly is desperate. This looks promising, I say, tucking the document into my portfolio. I'll have my lawyer review it and get back to you by Friday. Marco's shoulders sag with relief. Thank you, Sophia. I knew you'd see the potential in joining forces. I smile enigmatically. I always appreciate a good opportunity when I see one. Friday comes, but my response doesn't. Instead, Marco receives notice that Sierra Coffee is suspending deliveries due to payment concerns. When he calls me in a panic, I express sympathetic surprise and promise to accelerate my decision timeline. Another week passes. Bean and Gone's hours shorten as they struggle with supply issues. Customer complaints mount. Staff begin calling in sick with suspicious frequency, many secretly interviewing at Original Brew or are soon to open new locations. Marco's calls grow increasingly frantic, but I maintain a careful balance of seeming interest and procedural delays. My investors have some concerns about the debt structure, I explain. We're working through the details. Finally, the moment arrives. Bean and Gone's primary investor group calls their loans, forcing Marco to either secure immediate replacement funding or face bankruptcy. He shows up at Original Brew after closing, the bell above the door jangling discordantly as he pushes through with desperate energy. I need an answer now, Sophia, he demands, his voice cracking slightly. Tomorrow morning at the latest. The investors are pulling out. I regard him calmly from behind the counter, where I'm wiping down the espresso machine. The rich coffee scent that permeates the cafe seems to mock Marco's failing business. Actually, I say, setting down my cloth, I'm ready to discuss terms, but not here. Let's meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at your investor's office. Bring everyone involved. I have a presentation I'd like to share. Marco blinks in confusion. Their office? Why? Because what I have to propose affects all parties, I reply cryptically. Trust me, Marco, this is the best way forward. He hesitates, then nods, desperation overriding his suspicion. Fine. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. As he leaves, I send a pre-composed email to my team. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Operation Bean Counter commences. Be prepared. The investor's office occupies the 30th floor of a downtown high-rise, offering panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The conference room table gleams under recessed lighting, its polished surface reflecting the tense faces gathered around it. Marco sits at one end, flanked by his increasingly impatient investor group, 4 stone-faced executives in expensive suits. I take the opposite position, with Eduardo and Vanessa beside me, our calm demeanor a stark contrast to the nervous energy emanating from Marco's side. Thank you all for meeting today, I begin, setting my laptop on the table. I understand Bean and Gone is at a critical juncture, and I appreciate the opportunity to present a potential solution. The lead investor, a silver-haired man named Richard, whom I recognize from my previous life, leans forward. Mr. Valdez indicated you're interested in a merger. We're open to discussing terms, but time is of the essence. I smile, the expression not quite reaching my eyes. Actually, what I'm proposing is somewhat different. Before I begin, I'd like to distribute some materials for reference during my presentation. I hand out folders containing carefully curated documents, financial analyses, market projections, and legal briefings that my team has prepared over the past weeks. As you review these materials, I continue, connecting my laptop to the room's projector. I'd like to share some background on my involvement with Bean and Gone that may provide helpful context. The projector flickers to life, displaying the original Bean and Gone business plan, my business plan, from our early partnership days. The familiar logo and concept boards evoke a twinge of nostalgia that I quickly suppress. Bean and Gone began as a shared vision, I explain, my voice steady and professional. A concept for an ethical, quality-focused coffee chain that would prioritize exceptional beans, expert preparation techniques, and sustainable practices. I click to the next slide, the document Marco signed acknowledging my intellectual contribution to the business. This original vision was largely my creation, as Mr. Valdez acknowledged in writing. However, when investor interest materialized, the ownership structure shifted dramatically. Marco shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his cologne seeming particularly cloying in the confined space of the conference room. Richard glances at him with a deepening frown. Miss Chen, while this history is interesting, Richard interjects, I'm not sure how it relates to the current financial situation or your merger proposal. Bear with me, I reply smoothly. The historical context directly impacts the value proposition I'm about to present. I advance to the next slide, a graph showing Bean and Gone's revenue trajectory, with a clear downward trend beginning precisely when Marco switched from Eduardo's beans to Sierra's inferior product. Bean and Gone's current challenges began approximately 4 months ago, when management decided to prioritize cost-cutting over quality maintenance. The switch to a lower-grade coffee supplier resulted in an immediate negative impact on customer retention and sales volume. Richard turns to Marco, eyebrows raised. You assured us the supplier change would be undetectable to customers. Before Marco can respond, I continue, advancing to another slide. Further cost-cutting measures in other areas, staff reduction, cheaper milk products, extended bean storage times, compounded the initial quality decline. The tension in the room thickens like the crema on a perfectly pulled espresso. Marco's hands clench into fists on the tabletop, knuckles whitening. Meanwhile, I say, clicking to a new slide showing Original Brew's ascending revenue curve, the market clearly demonstrated its preference for the original Bean and Gone concept. Quality coffee, expertly prepared, ethically sourced. My current business, Original Brew, has maintained these principles and seen extraordinary growth as a result. Richard and the other investors study the contrasting graphs with increasing interest. The scent of opportunity begins to overpower Marco's cologne in the room. I'm still not clear on your proposal, Richard says, though his tone suggests growing comprehension. I smile, advancing to my final slide, a formal acquisition offer. Original Brew would like to acquire Bean and Gone's assets, specifically its 3 established locations, at a valuation reflecting their current distressed state. We would convert them to Original Brew branches, implementing our successful business model across all locations. Marco half rises from his chair. This is absurd. You promised a merger, not a hostile takeover. I regard him calmly. I promise to consider a merger. After due diligence, this acquisition is the more sensible approach for all parties. All parties except me, Marco snaps. Richard raises a hand to silence him. The valuation you're proposing is significantly below our initial investment. It reflects the current market reality, I respond. Bean and Gone's brand has been damaged by quality compromises and is now operating at a loss. My offer provides an exit strategy that salvages some value from increasingly distressed assets. The investors exchange glances, a silent communication passing between them. Marco looks increasingly panicked, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the room's comfortable temperature. We'll need to discuss this privately, Richard finally says. Of course, I reply, gathering my materials. There is one additional factor you should consider during your deliberations. I pull a final document from my portfolio, a comprehensive report on Bean and Gone's health code violations, complete with photographic evidence I gathered during my time as operations manager. Bean and Gone currently has several unaddressed health code issues that could trigger inspections and potential shutdowns if reported to authorities. Original Brew's acquisition would include a complete health and safety overhaul of all locations, mitigating this liability. The implied threat hangs in the air like the aroma of darkly roasted beans, bitter and unmistakable. Marco's face drains of color as he recognizes the photos from his own storage areas. "We'll take this under advisement," Richard says stiffly, accepting the document. As Eduardo, Vanessa, and I prepare to leave, Marco follows us into the hallway, catching my arm just outside the conference room door. "How are you doing this?" he hisses, voice low enough that the investors can't hear. "You've only been in the coffee business for 6 months, but you're operating like a seasoned industry veteran. Your predictions about market responses, supplier dynamics, seasonal adjustments, it's uncanny." I extract my arm from his grip, straightening my sleeve with deliberate calm. "Perhaps I'm just a quick study." "No," Marco insists, stepping closer. His aftershave can't quite mask the sour scent of fear emanating from him. "It's more than that. You knew exactly how customers would respond to the bean change before it happened. You anticipated supply chain issues that even industry experts didn't foresee. It's like what?" I prompt when he trails off. Marco shakes his head, eyes narrowing. "Like you've done this before. Like you somehow knew exactly what would happen and planned for it months in advance." For a moment, I consider telling him the truth, that I have indeed lived through this before, that my foreknowledge comes from witnessing his betrayal and my own failure in another lifetime. But the confusion and fear in his eyes is too satisfying to dispel. "Intuition," I say instead, offering a sphinx-like smile. "Some people have a knack for anticipating outcomes." "Bullshit," he mutters, but there's uncertainty beneath his bravado. "There's something else going on here. Nobody builds relationships with every major supplier, predicts seasonal market shifts, and develops brand loyalty this quickly without inside information." I check my watch, a deliberate power move to show my time is valuable. "If we're done with the conspiracy theories, I have a business to run, one that's actually profitable." The barb strikes home. Marco flinches visibly before his expression hardens. "This isn't over, Sophia. When the investors reject your insulting offer, you'll regret trying to strong-arm us." "We'll see," I reply, turning toward the elevator. "I suspect they're more pragmatic than you give them credit for." 3 hours later, my phone rings. Richard calling from the investor group. "We'd like to continue discussions about your acquisition proposal," he says without preamble. "Can you meet tomorrow morning?" "Of course," I reply, satisfaction warming me from within. "Same time, same place?" "Yes, and Miss Chen? Come prepared to negotiate. Your initial offer is inadequate, but we're motivated sellers under the right terms." "I understand completely," I assure him. "I'll see you tomorrow." After hanging up, I allow myself a moment of pure, unadulterated victory, a feeling I was denied in my previous life. The smooth wooden counter beneath my fingertips grounds me in this reality, as I savor the sweetness of pending success. Eduardo approaches, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "They're selling," I confirm. "Marco's reign at Bean and Gone is effectively over." Eduardo breaks into a wide smile. "You did it, Sophia. You reclaimed what was rightfully yours." I shake my head slightly. Not yet, but soon. That night, I dream of my previous life, the gradual decline of Bean and Gone after Marco pushed me out, the eventual bankruptcy, my years of struggling to rebuild my career in the shadow of that failure. The dream is so vivid that I wake gasping, the phantom taste of bitter disappointment lingering on my tongue. For a disorienting moment, I wonder if this second chance has been the dream, if I'll wake to find myself back in my previous life's dismal apartment, watching Marco's success from afar. But the unfamiliar shadows of my new bedroom gradually reassert themselves, and with them, the certainty of my rebirth and coming vindication. I rise early, selecting my outfit with care, a sharp charcoal suit that conveys authority without ostentation. The negotiations will require a delicate balance of firmness and flexibility, and my appearance should reflect both qualities. On my way to the meeting, I stop at Original Brew for a ritual cappuccino. The morning rush is in full swing. Customers lining up for their daily fix of Eduardo's exceptional beans prepared with my exacting standards. The cafe buzzes with conversation and the rhythmic whir of grinders, creating a symphony of commerce that soothes my pre-meeting nerves. "Everything okay, boss?" Javier asks as he hands me my perfectly crafted drink, the velvet microfoam forming a heart atop the rich espresso. I smile, taking a moment to appreciate the complex aroma rising from the cup. Everything's exactly as it should be. The negotiation proceeds more smoothly than even I anticipated. Richard and his investor group, facing mounting losses and concerned about potential health code violations, prove surprisingly amenable to my revised offer. By noon, we've reached an agreement in principle. Original Brew will acquire Bean and Gone's 3 locations at a discounted but fair valuation, with a structured payout that protects both parties' interests. Marco is conspicuously absent from these discussions. When I inquire about his whereabouts, Richard's expression tightens. Mr. Valdez has been relieved of his management responsibilities, effective immediately. The investor group now controls all decision-making regarding Bean and Gone's future. I maintain a neutral expression, though inside I'm savoring this development. I see. Will he retain any ownership interest after the acquisition? Richard shakes his head. His equity position has been significantly diluted due to recent capital calls. He's essentially a minority shareholder at this point, with no operational authority. The news is better than I expected. Marco's downfall more complete than in my original plan. The sweet taste of victory mingles with the lingering notes of my morning cappuccino. "I understand," I say diplomatically. "Please convey to Mr. Valdez that Original Brew will honor all existing staff contracts during the transition. We value Bean and Gone's team and hope to retain as many employees as possible." Richard nods appreciatively. That's generous considering the circumstances. I smile. Good business isn't always about winning at all costs. Sometimes it's about creating sustainable value for everyone involved. The irony of dispensing this wisdom to Marco's former backers isn't lost on me. In my previous life, these same investors dismissed my concerns about quality and sustainability, embracing Marco's profit-first approach. Now they're learning the costly lesson I tried to warn them about years ago, in another lifetime. As we rise to conclude the meeting, Richard hesitates, then asks the question that's clearly been bothering him. "Miss Chen, if you don't mind my asking, how did you manage to build such a comprehensive understanding of the coffee industry so quickly? Your business model, supplier relationships, market predictions, they reflect insights that typically take years to develop." I've prepared for this question, crafting an answer that sounds plausible without revealing my impossible truth. I've studied the coffee industry for years, long before opening Original Brew. I've visited farms in Colombia, Ethiopia, and Indonesia, learning directly from growers. The practical application came later, but the knowledge was accumulated over time. Richard nods, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. "Well, it certainly shows in your operation. Had we known of your expertise earlier, perhaps things would have unfolded differently with Bean and Gone." "Perhaps," I agree noncommittally, "but I believe everything happens as it should in its own time." We shake hands and I leave with signed preliminary acquisition documents in my portfolio. The heavy paper feels substantial in my hands, tangible evidence of my victory in this second chance at life. Outside the building, the afternoon sun warms my face as I descend the steps to the street level. The city bustles around me, pedestrians hurrying past, oblivious to the momentous shift that has just occurred in my personal universe. And I'm so absorbed in my thoughts that I almost miss Marco, waiting beside a sleek black car parked at the curb. His posture is rigid, his expression thunderous as he watches me approach. "Congratulations," he says, voice brittle with barely contained fury. "You've successfully destroyed everything I built." I stop, maintaining a safe distance. "I didn't destroy anything, Marco. I simply offered a solution to a problem of your own making. If you hadn't cut corners on quality, Bean and Gone would still be thriving." "Don't pretend this was about quality," he snaps. "This was revenge, pure and simple. You couldn't stand that I built something successful, so you systematically undermined it until you could take it for yourself. The accusation, so perfectly inverting the truth of what happened in both lifetimes, nearly startles a laugh from me. Instead, I maintain my composed exterior. Is that really how you see it? I ask, genuinely curious about his distorted perspective. You stole my concept, excluded me from key meetings, registered my business name without permission, and then offered me a token position in what should have been our shared enterprise. When I declined and created my own competing business, you planted prohibited substances during a health inspection to shut me down. And somehow, I'm the villain in this story? Marco's face flushes with color. You can't prove any of that. I don't need to anymore, I reply calmly. The investors have made their decision. Been and gone, at least as you envisioned it, is finished. He steps closer, lowering his voice. How did you do it? How did you know exactly how to target our vulnerabilities? You knew things about our operation that weren't public knowledge. I should walk away. There's nothing to gain from prolonging this conversation. But something in me, perhaps the part that still carries the pain of my previous life's failure, wants him to understand just how thoroughly he's been outmaneuvered. Perhaps I paid attention while working as your operations manager, I suggest. Perhaps I noticed the corners you were cutting, the suppliers you were alienating, the staff you were demoralizing with unrealistic expectations, or perhaps I trail off, letting the unfinished thought hang between us. Perhaps what? Marco demands. Perhaps some things are beyond your understanding, I finish cryptically. Not everything has a logical explanation you'd accept. Frustration contorts his features. What is that supposed to mean? I check my watch, another deliberate power move. I have to go. The original brew team is waiting for an update on the acquisition. As I turn to leave, Marco calls after me, his voice carrying a note of desperation beneath the anger. This isn't over, Sophia. You think you've won, but you haven't seen the last of me. I continue walking without looking back, his threats rolling off me like water from freshly waxed canvas. In my previous life, such words would have terrified me. Now they're merely the impotent raging of a man who has lost everything that mattered to him, just as I once did. That evening, we celebrate at Original Brew after closing. The cafe is transformed by candlelight and the pop of champagne corks, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasts with its usual daytime ambience. Eduardo, Vanessa, and the rest of our core team gather around tables pushed together in the center of the room, glasses raised in victory. To Sophia, Eduardo toasts, his voice warm with admiration, who showed us that when you refuse to compromise on quality and integrity, success eventually follows. To Original Brew, Vanessa adds, soon to be the city's premier coffee chain. The glasses clink musically, champagne fizzing against my lips as I sip. The celebration continues around me, but I find myself slightly removed from the moment, reflecting on the journey that brought me here, a journey spanning 2 lifetimes. In the midst of the festivities, my phone vibrates with an incoming text. An unknown number, but the message makes the sender unmistakable. We need to talk. I know there's something impossible about you. Meet me tomorrow at noon, the park bench where we first discussed Bean and Gone. Come alone. Marco. His persistence would be admirable if it weren't so misguided. I consider ignoring the message, but find myself curious about what he thinks he knows. What impossible truth he believes he's uncovered. I slip the phone back into my pocket without responding, returning my attention to the celebration. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Tonight is for savoring this victory, a victory denied me in my previous existence. The next morning dawns clear and crisp, autumn asserting itself in the reddening leaves and cool breeze that carries the scent of wood smoke and possibility. I dress casually for my meeting with Marco, choosing comfort over the power suits of recent days. The park is quiet at noon on a weekday, populated mainly by mothers with strollers and elderly couples enjoying the mild weather. The bench where Marco and I once sat dreaming of Bean and Gone, in both lifetimes, sits empty beneath a maple tree beginning to shed its fiery foliage. I settle on the bench, taking deep breaths of the autumn air. The familiar scent of fallen leaves and damp earth grounds me in this moment, reminding me how different my circumstances are now compared to my previous life. A squirrel darts across the path, pausing momentarily to assess me before continuing its frantic collection of winter provisions. Marco arrives precisely at noon, his normally immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled. His hair looks unwashed, his designer stubble has evolved into the beginnings of an unkempt beard, and dark circles shadow his eyes. The cologne he once wore so liberally is absent, replaced by the faint sour smell of someone who has been drinking heavily. He sits beside me without greeting, maintaining a careful distance on the bench. For several minutes, we simply exist in silence, watching a young mother push a laughing toddler on a nearby swing set. "I couldn't sleep last night," Marco finally says, his voice rougher than I remember. "I kept thinking about everything that's happened, trying to make sense of it." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "The way you anticipated every move, countered every strategy before I even implemented it." He turns to face me, eyes searching mine. "It's not possible, not without foreknowledge." A fallen maple leaf spirals down between us, landing on the bench. I pick it up, examining its intricate veining as I formulate my response. "What are you suggesting, Marco? That I'm psychic? That I can see the future?" I keep my tone lightly mocking, though my heart races at how close he's coming to an impossible truth. He doesn't smile. "I've considered every rational explanation. Industrial espionage, inside information from the investors, pure coincidence." His fingers drum nervously against his thigh. "None of it fits. The timeline doesn't work." I twirl the leaf between my fingers, its crisp edges scratching against my skin. "Perhaps you're overthinking this. Perhaps I simply understand coffee and business better than you gave me credit for." "No," he says firmly. "It's more than that. You knew things you couldn't possibly know. Like the day you warned Eduardo about Sierra's supply issues before they happened. Or how you prepared for health inspections on exactly the days they occurred. Or how you seemed to know which locations I was considering for expansion before I even contacted the realtors." The leaf crumbles in my suddenly tense grip, fragments falling to the ground between my feet. Marco notices, his eyes tracking the movement before returning to my face. "There's only one explanation that fits all the facts," he continues, lowering his voice despite the empty park around us. "Somehow, you've lived through this before. Somehow you knew exactly what I would do because you'd already seen me do it." The truth of his words sends an involuntary shiver through me. In my previous life, I would have denied such an outlandish claim, tried to convince him he was being irrational. But in this second chance, I find myself tired of pretense. "And if that were true," I ask softly, "what would it matter now?" Marco's eyes widen almost imperceptibly. He wasn't expecting even this oblique acknowledgement of his theory. "It would mean you had an unfair advantage, that this wasn't a fair competition." A laugh escapes me before I can suppress it, sharp and bitter like over-extracted espresso. "Fair? You want to talk about fairness, Marco? Was it fair when you excluded me from the investor meeting in our first go-around? Was it fair when you registered my business name without my knowledge? Was it fair when you offered me 5% of what should have been an equal partnership?" He flinches at each accusation, but his expression remains stubborn. "Business isn't about fairness, it's about leverage and opportunity. I saw an opening and I took it." "And I didn't this time," I challenge him. "Isn't that exactly what you would have done in my position? Used every advantage available to secure the outcome you wanted?" "That's different," he insists, though uncertainty creeps into his voice. "How? Because you're the one who lost this time?" Marco falls silent, unable to articulate why his opportunism was acceptable, but mine represents some cosmic injustice. A child's laughter rings out across the park, the sound incongruously joyful against our tense conversation. "What happened?" he finally asks, genuine curiosity replacing some of his hostility. "In this other version you experienced, how did it end?" I hesitate, weighing how much to reveal. The memories of my previous life's failures still sting, but perhaps sharing them will finally bring closure. "You succeeded," I admit quietly. "Bean and Gone expanded rapidly, too rapidly. Quality suffered at every new location. You prioritized growth over sustainability, cutting corners wherever possible. For a while, it worked. The chain grew to 12 locations within 2 years." Marco's expression brightens momentarily before he catches himself. "And then?" Then reality caught up. Customer complaints multiplied. Staff turnover reached unsustainable levels. Eduardo and other quality suppliers refused to work with you. The health department finally caught up with the violations you'd been hiding. I pause, remembering the headlines that had simultaneously vindicated and devastated me. Bean and Gone collapsed spectacularly in its third year, a very public bankruptcy. And you, he prompts, seemingly invested in this alternate history. I struggled, tried opening my own cafe, but couldn't secure proper funding. Your investors had poisoned the well. Ended up working as a barista for a corporate chain, watching everything I'd created and cared about reduced to a footnote in local business failure news. The admission cost me something. Acknowledging my previous life's defeat makes it real again in a way I've tried to avoid. The crisp autumn air suddenly feels cold against my skin, raising goosebumps along my arms. Marco absorbs this information silently, his expression unreadable. When he finally speaks, his voice holds a note I've never heard from him before, something approaching contrition. I wouldn't have wanted that for you, he says softly, even after everything. Wouldn't you? I challenge him. You seemed perfectly content to relegate me to operations manager while you took the credit and control. He shakes his head. That was different. I still wanted you involved, still valued your expertise. I just wanted the recognition more. And now? I ask. What do you want now, Marco? Why this meeting? He draws a deep breath, the sound shaky and uncertain. I want another chance. A position at Original Brew. I know coffee, Sophia. Despite everything, I know how to build a brand, how to attract investors. I could be an asset to your expansion. The request is so unexpected that I can't immediately formulate a response. In my previous life, Marco never acknowledged my expertise, never sought to work under my leadership. His pride wouldn't allow it. This deviation from my expectations momentarily unbalances me. You want to work for me, I repeat slowly, after everything that's happened. He nods, a flash of the old Marco, charming, confident, persuasive, breaking through his disheveled exterior. Think about it logically. I built Bean and Gone into a recognizable brand. I secured millions in investment. Yes, I made mistakes with quality control, but that's where your expertise comes in. Together, we could still be the perfect partnership we once envisioned. For a fleeting moment, I consider it. Marco does have talents I lack. His charm with investors, his marketing instincts, his ability to envision rapid growth. In this second life, with me firmly in control, perhaps his skills could be harnessed without the destructive consequences of his previous leadership. But then I remember the look on his face when he excluded me from that first investor meeting. The casual way he dismissed my protests when registering the business in only his name. The calculated offer of a token position in what should have been our shared enterprise. And most damningly, the satisfaction in his eyes when the health inspector found the planted evidence at Original Brew, an escalation of betrayal that revealed the true depth of his ruthlessness. No, I say, the word emerging with quiet finality. That won't be possible. His expression hardens. Because you can't forgive me? Or because you're enjoying your revenge too much to share even a fraction of your success? Neither, I reply honestly. Because fundamental trust, once broken, can't be repaired, especially when it's been broken in exactly the same way twice. Twice? He questions, brow furrowing. In my previous life, and in this one. I rise from the bench, brushing leaf fragments from my clothes. You didn't just betray me once, Marco. Given the exact same circumstances, with the exact same opportunities, you made the same self-serving choices. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. He stands abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. So that's it? No second chances? You had your second chance, I remind him gently. You got to live this scenario twice, just as I did. And you chose betrayal both times. A gust of wind sends more leaves tumbling between us. They're rustling, a melancholy accompaniment to our final conversation. Marco's shoulders slump as the truth of my words sinks in. What happens now? He asks, sounding genuinely lost. Now? I consider the question. Now, Original Brew continues to grow. The Bean and Gone locations will be renovated and rebranded over the next month. You? I shrug. You'll find something new. You're resourceful, Marco. Always have been. And us? this unfinished business between us? I smile, feeling the weight of 2 lifetimes of conflict finally beginning to lift. It's finished now. Consider your friendship discount permanently revoked. As I walk away, leaving Marco standing alone beneath the maple tree, I expect to feel triumphant. Instead, a quiet peace settles over me. Not the sharp satisfaction of revenge, but the gentler contentment of justice finally served. The sounds of the park fade behind me as I make my way toward Original Brew, where Eduardo and the team are waiting to begin planning our expansion. The path ahead stretches clear and promising, unburdened by the ghosts of my previous life's failures. The integration of Bean and Gone's locations into the Original Brew brand proceeds smoothly over the following weeks. I personally oversee each conversion, ensuring the renovations honor the original vision I had for Bean and Gone before Marco's betrayal. Eduardo secures a steady supply of his premium beans for all locations, while our newly expanded team implements the exacting quality standards that have made Original Brew successful. The rich, complex aroma of properly extracted espresso gradually replaces the memory of Bean and Gone's increasingly inferior product. I rehire many of the staff Marco had let go during his cost-cutting phase, including several experienced baristas who bring valuable institutional knowledge about their specific locations. Their grateful enthusiasm infuses the newly branded cafes with positive energy that customers immediately notice and respond to. 1 month after the acquisition, I'm working at our newest location, the former Bean and Gone flagship store, training staff on our signature drink preparations. The familiar rhythm of the espresso machine's hiss and gurgle creates a soothing backdrop as I demonstrate the precise tamping pressure required for our single-origin Ethiopian beans. The extraction should take exactly 23 seconds, I explained to the assembled baristas, the rich scent of freshly ground coffee rising between us. Any longer, and you'll get bitterness. Any shorter, and you'll miss the complex floral notes that make this bean special. The front door chimes softly, signaling a customer's arrival. Without looking up from the espresso machine, I continue my demonstration. Notice the color transition as the extraction progresses, from deep caramel to honey blonde. This visual cue is as important as timing. Sophia. Marco's voice cuts through the ambient cafe noise, instantly recognizable despite the weeks since our park bench conversation. I finish pulling the shot before looking up, taking my time to assess the perfect creamy before turning to face him. He looks marginally better than during our last encounter, cleanly shaven, hair trimmed, clothes pressed. But there's a hollowness to his features that no amount of grooming can disguise, a diminishment that radiates from within. Marco, I acknowledge with a nod. What can I get you? His eyes scan the cafe, once his flagship store, now transformed with Original Brew's distinctive decor and equipment. The transformation seems to pain him physically, his shoulders tensing as he takes in the changes. Could we speak privately? He asks, his voice carefully controlled. I glance at my watch, then at the trainees waiting expectantly for the next part of their demonstration. I can give you 5 minutes. Javier, please continue with the latte art instruction while I step away. I lead Marco to the small office at the back of the cafe, the space that was once his private domain now redecorated with Original Brew's branding and my personal touches. The lingering scent of fresh paint and new furniture has all but erased any trace of his previous occupancy. What can I do for you? I ask, not offering him a seat. The power dynamic between us has shifted so dramatically that even this small office interaction feels like a negotiation. Marco reaches into his jacket pocket and produces a folded document, which he places on the desk between us. I found this while clearing out my apartment. I thought you might want it. I unfold the paper cautiously, immediately recognizing the faded handwriting and coffee stains. It's our original partnership agreement, the very first draft we created together at that park bench, long before investors or formal business plans. 2 signatures at the bottom, his and mine, promising equal partnership and shared vision. Where did you get this? I ask, genuine surprise coloring my voice. In my previous life, this document disappeared during our early days, Marco claiming he'd lost it after our first meeting with potential investors. I kept it, he admits quietly, even after everything changed with the investors, even after I took control of the business. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. I run my fingers over the coffee-stained paper, feeling the texture of a promise made and broken. Twice. Why are you giving this to me now? Marco looks directly into my eyes, and for the first time since I've known him, in either lifetime, I see something approaching genuine remorse. Because you were right. I betrayed you. Not just in this life, but apparently in another one I don't even remember. The admission hangs in the air between us, unexpected and disarming. I carefully refold the document, buying time to process this shift. I've been offered a position with a coffee startup in Seattle, he continues when I don't immediately respond. Fresh start, new city. Before I go, I wanted to... He trails off, seemingly unsure how to articulate his purpose. Cleanse your conscience? I suggest, not unkindly. He shakes his head. No, I don't think that's possible, not really. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away, what it cost both of us. The sincerity in his voice catches me off guard. In all my planning, in all my carefully orchestrated moves to reclaim what was rightfully mine, I never anticipated this moment. Marco acknowledging the full weight of his betrayal. There's something else I wanted to ask you, he says, his expression tentative. Something I can't explain or understand, but that I need to know before I leave. I raise an eyebrow, waiting. That day at the park, he begins carefully. You said I betrayed you in exactly the same way twice. That I made the same choices in both lives. His voice catches slightly on the last word, as if he still can't quite believe what he's saying. How is that possible? How can you remember a life I don't... The question I've been expecting since he first hinted at his suspicions. The impossible truth that separates my experience from his. I don't know, I answer honestly. I died, heart attack, sudden and unexpected. And then I woke up 5 years earlier with all my memories intact. A complete restart, but with perfect knowledge of what was to come. Marco's eyes widen slightly. So everything that happened with Bean and Gone, with us? I knew it all before it happened, I confirm. The investor meeting you excluded me from. The business registration in your name only. The 5% equity offer. The switch to Sierra's Beans. All of it. And you let it happen again? He asks incredulously. You didn't try to change things from the beginning? A fair question. One I've asked myself many times during quiet moments. I did change things, I correct him. Small adjustments at first. Documenting everything, making connections I'd neglected in my previous life. But the major events, yes, I allowed those to unfold similarly. Why? The confusion in his voice is genuine. I consider my answer carefully, wanting to be honest with both Marco and myself. Because I needed to know if you would make the same choices given the same opportunities. If your betrayal was situational or fundamental to who you are. The answer seems to wound him physically. He sinks into the visitor's chair without invitation, shoulders slumping. And I failed the test. Yes, I say simply. In both lifetimes, given the exact same circumstances, you chose personal gain over partnership, profits over quality, expediency over integrity. A heavy silence fills the small office, broken only by the distant sounds of the cafe, the rhythmic tapping of espresso grounds being knocked from portafilters, the hiss of steam wands frothing milk, the murmur of customer conversations. Life continuing beyond our private reckoning. How can you be sure this rebirth won't happen again? Marco finally asks. That you won't wake up 5 years ago and have to live through all this a third time? The question startles me. Not because I haven't considered it, but because I didn't expect Marco to make such an intuitive leap. I can't be sure, I admit. But if it does, I'll make different choices next time. What would you do differently? His tone suggests the question matters deeply to him. I smile faintly. I wouldn't work with you at all. I'd start Original Brew immediately on my own terms without giving you the opportunity to betray me. Marco winces but nods, accepting the harsh truth. I suppose I deserve that. It's not about what you deserve, I tell him gently. It's about what I've learned across 2 lifetimes. Some partnerships, no matter how promising they seem, are fundamentally flawed. Some people, no matter how charming or talented, will always prioritize their interests above all else. He looks down at his hands, now empty of the business he once controlled. And you think I can't change? That in some hypothetical third life, I would betray you yet again? The question gives me pause. Can people truly change their fundamental nature? Or are we all destined to repeat our essential patterns regardless of circumstances? I don't know, I answer truthfully. But I do know I'm not willing to risk finding out. Twice was enough, Marco. He nods slowly, accepting this verdict without further argument. Rising from the chair, he extends his hand formally across the desk. Thank you for your time and for explaining things I had no right to understand. I consider his outstretched hand, this simple gesture of professional courtesy that contrasts so sharply with our complex history. After a moment's hesitation, I take it, feeling the brief warmth of human connection before we both pull away. Good luck in Seattle, I offer. I hope you find what you're looking for there. A shadow of the old Marco, charming, confident, boundlessly optimistic, flashes across his face. Maybe I'll start the next coffee revolution. Third time's the charm, right? I don't smile at the weak joke. Just remember the lesson from this revolution. Quality matters. Integrity matters. Treating people fairly matters. I'll remember, he promises. And for a moment, I almost believe him. Then he turns and walks out of the office, through the cafe, and out the door without looking back. I watch through the large front windows as he pauses on the sidewalk, gazing up at the original brew sign that now hangs, where Bean and Gone's logo once proclaimed his brief success. His expression is unreadable from this distance, but his posture, shoulders slightly bowed, head tilted upward, suggests a complex mixture of regret and resignation. Then he straightens, adjusts his jacket, and walks away, disappearing into the flow of pedestrians. I turn back to the document he left behind, our original partnership agreement, the physical embodiment of what might have been in two separate lifetimes. After a moment's consideration, I place it in the office shredder, watching as the promise we made and broke twice is reduced to confetti. Some chapters need to end completely before new ones can truly begin.